Welcome to Tech Talk with R&E Automated. I'm your host, Jordan Dieterle. Join us as we dive into the world of automation and manufacturing, bringing you expert insights from industrial professionals and business leaders. Whether you're a business owner, engineer, or simply passionate about technology, this podcast is your go-to source for the latest trends and innovations in the field. Welcome, everybody, to Tech Talk with R&E. I'm your host, Jordan Dieterle. Today, I have a guest that is involved in a lot of maintenance operations. He's a maintenance manager, and he's built a career around developing systems to improve maintenance reliability and sustainability. He's made a well-diverse background, working from some well-known suppliers within the upstate. I'd like to introduce Trent McJunkin. Hi, Trent.
Hey, Jordan. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. So I wanted to kind of get down and into the nitty gritty of what your background is and what has helped you lead the maintenance and the project management of starting up and building out a automotive plant from the ground up.
Gotcha. So I guess a little bit of background on me is I ended up in industrial maintenance after I went to college, majored in industrial electronics, really cut my teeth at an OEM and learned a lot from a lot of the guys on the floor, boots on the ground, taught me a lot, moved up in that role, eventually became a maintenance supervisor, and most recently, for the last few years, I've been a facilities and maintenance manager, leading an entire team to see the upfit and now the production of another automotive plant. But one thing that I've learned a lot of is projects quickly become too big for one person to manage yourself. So one of the big lessons learned is really build your team, find people who are smarter than you and smart about things that you necessarily don't have exposure to, and really use that as a force multiplier and really build that team out so you can be in more than one place at once.
Oh yeah. You're like developing like kind of a pro maintenance strategy, to like minimize like downtime because you're basically employing people that are like smarter than you. Obviously, I do the same thing. I'm always for that component, right? To how do we support the plan in a area that I don't know, and it's usually by hiring another individual that just knows that area, correct?
Yeah. I think you have to know yourself to know where your weak points are, and what is that person who complements you really well as far as skill set goes that can still mesh with the team.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of asked this same question: like the challenges, like what were the challenges, or are the challenges like from starting from scratch? Is building the team like the kind of the key component, or is there other challenges?
I think there are two. Building the team is definitely a big one, but you can't laser focus on that because you have all these things going on around. You have equipment that's being procured. You have installation, whether they have installation standards or not. I hope you do have those. If you don't, I would advise that being in the contract. But overseeing the installation of the equipment, looking at drawings, are they in English? All kinds of stuff. That's a big one. Where are you going to keep these drawings? Recommended spares. There's so many things, and you can't do that as one person. So finding the right people to put into those roles to quickly scale your team to grow along with the business is probably the most critical one.
Okay. Yeah. So basically just trying to bring in the right team that, hey, I mean, honestly, to allow them to grow within the business, to support you and in the operation of the plant is overall, like kind of what I'm kind of getting of that. Is that kind of correct?
Right. You have to just put the right people in the right seats, and there's a right time to hire everybody.
Good. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And does that like roll into like, hey, also like making sure, that they're being safe and following the safety protocols within the plant operation, like what areas does all that imply in? Like, say, are you basically managing, you say, this side, or the maintenance side, the facility side, the safety side? Is it kind of all those areas is what you are kind of referring to?
Yeah, yeah. It's especially when you're in a more of a construction management type role during the upfit of a facility. Uh,
Mhm.
the maintenance manager and whoever the safety manager is, they're going to be working hand in hand a lot, and that can really benefit that relationship down the road. Uh, but even when it comes to when they're installing a big motor, how am I
Mhm.
going to access that motor to troubleshoot it in 5 years, or how am I going to put grease in that motor? How am I going to change the oil in this gearbox if they're just going to weld everything on top of it? Just
Yeah.
kind of thinking ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of what I was going for was they say, you started it from scratch, right? And they say there's got to be some alignment, from the beginning, and they say brings it up into the end, okay, now we're starting production, or we're running, or, you're kind of in the integration phase, right? And they say there's always a different phase, like of where you're focusing on. Obviously, you say you're starting here, and then now in the middle, they say it sounds like you're building out your team and your core group that you're going to depend on and that are going to be reliable for you. And then, obviously once we get to the production side of the things is what I'm kind of hearing.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Um, are there anything that you would rely on, like, for sustainability practices when you're like launching a plant, and say, like, have you guys like kind of figured that out, or um tried to find solutions to make it, more sustainable?
We definitely have put in some sustainability measures in place, but on the maintenance side, uh, one one key thing is really looking at shared components, common components. You don't want to have just odds and ends and
Mhm.
all kinds of different vendors and all these other things. That tends to more consumables, more different types of oil, more types of grease, and that ends up a really complicated process and more risk for contamination. But it's really a holistic approach as far as sustainability. It doesn't just live in the environmental world. It's a little bit of everybody.
Yeah, yeah. And so you're kind of like trying to, same robot, same PLC controller. I mean, that's the realm that I'm in. Is say, the technology side. I want to be, I want to be able to order that same relay every single time for
Yeah,
every single machine or every area. Is kind of
yeah,
the way that I'm looking or viewing that sustainability, because it makes your life easier, it makes your maintenance guy's life easier. It makes
right.
everybody in the plant's life easier when you can just basically go to the shelf and say, it's this one, and there's
Yeah,
not six.
yeah, yeah. Your storeroom can quickly become the same size as your plant if you
Yeah.
don't have some kind of standard in place.
Yeah. Those are like the hardest things to deal with too. When you're like the plant guy and you're like, well, we have 40 of them. What are
Yeah,
you supposed to do?
yeah.
No, that's good. Um, with that, like, have you guys like done like some IoT automation 4.0? I mean, I know a lot of companies are kind of going into that automation 4.0 and setting up like processes within new automation plants to kind of make it streamlined so that you can look into the future or find, variables, hey, this motor is at its life cycle because I'm seeing ramp ups in amperage, or or it's skipping out, or it's faulting out, every few weeks. They say, have you guys like kind of looked at implementation of that as well?
Yeah, yeah. And we're looking at all kinds of different technologies, some that we've implemented already. Having all these feed into your CMMS system. That way, if you say you have a vibration sensor on a motor
Mm.
and that gets out of that green zone and it starts getting to where you need to monitor it, it'll generate its own work order. And it'll say, hey, come look at me. I think I have some misalignment on the shaft. And then you can deploy the right resource at the right time and not have to wait for a catastrophic failure that could cost a lot of downtime.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's really good. I mean, I've watched that system in place, and it's pretty neat. How accurate it can become. A few of those systems in place, right? To say for within our business at R&E, deploying these, to say we do this all the time with where we're supporting those deployments of those automation 4.0 IoT systems. So it's very interesting, to see like, hey, how is every plant doing it? You say every plant does it different. So it's lucrative, to hear that they say like, hey, you can monitor this motor, you can monitor this robot, you could technically monitor a cylinder if you really wanted to. Let's say
Yeah.
there's some pretty neat stuff that's coming out with the like how deep down you can get within a manufacturing plant. So it's becoming very lucrative, as a cost perspective as well.
Yeah.
Um,
And you can really lose yourself in those technologies too. Just like, if you don't have a standard for, what type of motor we're going to use, you can have 50 different types.
yep.
You can have one-off solutions for IoT as well. And that
Yeah.
may not give you the end result that you really wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Nope. I definitely agree. Um, Well, looking back at like your experiences, what are like some of the lessons that you've learned, like that you wish you like knew at the beginning, like when you were starting this, right? I mean, obviously, like we're talking about a lot of different subjects here, and like I'm thinking, okay, automation 4.0. I mean, was there something like you were doing at the beginning, and you're like, man, I wish I would have known. Like now, you wish you would have known that back then.
I think something that I've always tried to carry with me is that not every problem you have requires an automation solution.
Mm-hmm.
If you just keep breaking things down to behaviors and actions and try to put some best practices in place, you can really simplify a lot of things in an automated plant. Uh, just trying to understand why things break. This big complex machine doesn't just go down. It's a component that fails, and the failure was induced at some point. And then just break it down to a smaller, understandable level, and you can scale that up to every piece of machinery you have.
Okay. Yeah. And say basically say trying to, I guess, not always automate, but like you're trying to basically make it simple so that they say when your team is working on something or you're trying to do something, it's pretty simple to solve the problem in front of them, not having to go through a whole bunch of, I guess, processes to figure it out. Is kind of what you're basically saying.
Right. Variability is the enemy of reliability, and you need reliability in your processes in order to make enough profit, for all your shareholders and all this other stuff. But breaking it down so that we eliminate the defect.
Yep.
If you have people who are hourly on the floor working, you can coach them to eliminate defects aggressively, and they can really get rid of a lot of low hanging fruit. And then that may pave the way for an automated solution that would require some capital. But there's a lot of progress to be made outside of capital investment with automation.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that first statement that you made. And what can you repeat that? It was like reliability.
Variability is the enemy of reliability.
Yeah, that was perfect. I was like, dang, he came up with that right off the bat. That was awesome. Um, sorry, it just kind of popped out at me.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it with a robot. I mean, if you have a gearbox that's going out, that robot's not going to go to the same spot every time. There's variation there, so you don't have a repeatable process.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. And I mean, it could vary just a tad bit, but I mean, hey, that's the idea is we want it to go to the same spot every time, but I mean, it could vary just slightly, and obviously, you're trying to minimize that. They say, which it's the same thing as a human person, right? They say that they're not going to do the same steps every single time in a process, but you can try to train them to do that.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. So I guess with that, are you like looking at it as like, all right, to say as I'm building out this plant, is there like future trends or future things that you're looking, okay, we'll implement in the future to improve our plant or improve your manufacturing process and as you go on and kind of see where your downfalls are at?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to have a vision of where you want to go, but it's not good enough to just have a vision. You have to break that down into steps. How are we going to get to say world class maintenance? Whatever that is for you and your organization. What are the behaviors that you need? And break that down to actionable steps. Do
Mhm.
I need if I'm going to have predictive technology? Do I need that predictive technology to communicate with my CMMS system? Do I need my CMMS system to communicate with my MES system? How are we going to track downtime? Will it be through the MES or will it be through the CMMS? Trying to understand what's the end goal and being flexible on how you get there, because we've all had this long-term vision. And if we've made progress on it, we've changed our routes 3, 4, 5 times just to get back in alignment with getting on the right track.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense with how that is. I mean, I keep hearing you say CMS system. What key does that play in like your maintenance platform? Just for our listeners, because I mean, sometimes they some of the listeners might not actually understand what that is. Can you explain that?
Gotcha. So CMMS is a computerized maintenance management system. If you're in, say, manufacturing, you may heard of Maximo, SAP, Upkeep, MaintainX, FlowPath. There's a ton out there, but it's basically how you keep up with your maintenance workflow and your asset history.
Okay. So does that like prioritize like your resources within your maintenance department too? I've heard you previously say that, hey, it'll give a ticket out that maybe this motor needs to be changed, to say it kind of gives them tasks, to say, so you're kind of like automating that a little bit as well.
So it really depends on your application and the system that you choose and how it's implemented. But it can really be a force multiplier. You can get more work done with the team that you have. You can have job plans in there. Say, we changed that motor 10 years ago, but all those guys have retired. Well, you can have a job plan on exactly how you change that motor, or PM intervals, step by step. You can have your operations and maintenance manuals in there. Any kind of schematic or any drawings that you have, they can all live in one place. And it really gets you off of having paper documentation, which is what we want to stay away from.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like you're preparing for like crisis management as well. Is that kind of the long-term goal? Like, hey, when I'm not there, my team should know where everything is at in case there's a crisis mode. Is that
Right.
kind of the okay? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's
And
really great.
I came from working on the shop floor as a maintenance guy. And one of my biggest frustrations is knowing that if I had the right resources, I could fix this problem.
Mhm.
But being just strapped with not having the adequate resources around me. So as I've moved up and I've had the opportunity to lead people, I want to make sure that the people who are actually doing the work have all the resources they need to make the best decisions for the business. Whether that's a schematic, whether they know, hey, where's the gas meter at? Hey, where's this job plan at? Hey, where does this fault message come from? What does this fault message on this robot? Having it
Mhm.
all in one place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it even gives you like, hey, if my team doesn't know, here's a vendor that, here's the vendor form, and say we can always give them a call and say, ask a question, or the hotline, or whatever's needed, is say it could be placed in there to make sure that, hey, they have a resource to call. Obviously they're probably, the first call is going to be to you, or to one of the supervisors within the team, or even a manager that could possibly know an answer first. But I mean, it could get elevated to even more, right? They say with all that stuff being placed in one software package or one place. They say is
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
It's all about minimizing your risk. And if you kind of look at business continuity and risk management on your maintenance management side, it's just being ready for the worst case scenario all the time and figuring
Mhm.
out what are these big, scary, risky monsters that we have out here on the floor and mitigating those risks the best we can.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, we at Arnie here, we run into those all the time where it's like, hey, they're calling and I need a guy tomorrow. And I'm like, well, I can get you guys somebody in 24 to 48 hours. I mean,
Yeah.
you got to give me, what are you looking for? Right.
Yeah.
So it always depends on, hey, they really need it. But they say sometimes, manufacturing plants don't always have, a maintenance manager or somebody that's preparing for that catastrophic failure in the future. And it's usually just, you're opening up, being on the floor, you're opening up the panel. There's the prints. Well, what prints? There's oil over them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been in that situation. It's tough. Um, so I guess looking back, like, what are some of the lessons that you've learned, from previous, say, employments? And I mean, I keep hearing, like, obviously, say you're developing this process and this system to, support the plants, or your plant, and the growth from the start to the finish. what are some of the lessons that you've learned in like starting the maintenance operation, and how are you going to utilize it, going forward?
I think one thing that I've learned from previous experience is the importance of systems and processes. W. Edwards Deming said that a bad system beats a good person every time. So most of our problems, if we really boil them down, are not people problems. They're system problems. Most people come to work and want to do a really good job, and they want to leave and feel that comfort of knowing, yeah, hey, I really had an honest day's work and I did my best and I did something good for the day. I really feel like most people want that.
Yeah.
But if we can equip people who want to do a good job with a really good system, they're going to do an even better job. And just thinking ahead for that, whether that's job plans, standard work, all these things, equipping normal people with extraordinary processes to do really impressive things at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have like a kind of like a story that you could kind of equate that to?
Let's see. I've had several instances where I've been in a few different plants, and there was one where I went to a plant out of state, and we showed up, and it was like everything was on fire.
Mhm.
The Even the parking lots were dirty. It was
Yeah.
terrible, and everybody was just really kind of beaten down, and they're like, man, this is terrible. And we just came in. All right, well, let's take this one machine. This is your biggest pain point. Let's clean it. Let's kind of do some PM on it. Look at your PMs. Look at your operator care routine. Get everybody trained up on it. And after a few days of us being there, they really started to say, hey, things aren't as bad as we thought. And they
Mhm.
really started to get that low hanging fruit, getting some momentum built up. And then we went to another piece of equipment and another piece of equipment. And I was there for a few weeks. And by the time we left, it was like a different plant. They really
Yeah.
started making good progress.
Yeah.
Just putting
You
some
almost,
structure around those people.
yeah, you almost like implemented like a training and skills development within the plant just by going there for a few weeks. That's like a
Yeah.
huge thing to do for a plant. I mean, obviously it's kind of seemed like common practices what you just said. Hey, why don't we just clean this up? Like, let's, clean the floor. Let's, basically make this, say, an area that you want to work. And then let's fix, these minor problems or these major problems on this machine in a clean work environment. Is that kind of the scenario that you're explaining there?
Yeah. And there's a big psychology piece to it, I think, is, just try to nudge people in the right direction to do positive things for the business.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you have, signage up for recycling, you have separate waste containers in a lunchroom or something, you're more likely to recycle. If
Sure.
your outside factors nudge you in that positive behavior direction. The same thing happens on a manufacturing floor. Whenever you have somebody do a pre-shift inspection on this machine, make sure, hey, I have all the fluids in there. I've changed out my consumables. I've swept up the floor, whatever it is. And you kind of expect that, and you kind of raise that standard, and everybody kind of takes pride in what they're doing.
Yep. Yeah. I'm a big component of, hey, I want to work in a nice clean environment, and then I'm like, my mind is just going, a million miles a minute, but it's always I feel more productive when
Yeah.
I'm in that area, and it's like, yeah, it's always a good feeling when I'm sitting there in a plant and I'm working, and hey, I've got everything I need here, and I can just kind of focus on that one thing to solve the problems that I had, especially in a manufacturing plant. You're getting pulled in every direction. They say multiple different directions a lot of times, and that's typically how it goes whenever you're in a management role or a lead role.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Asking plays a huge role in finding efficiency through processes.
yeah,
Speed is everything, but it's really efficiency and
yeah,
helping people become more efficient.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So I had like I have a few more questions to say, but I wanted to ask it. What I mean, we were kind of just talked about the training and development, but I mean, the big component that I'm a huge advocate for is like newcomers coming into the automation, maintenance, manufacturing realm here. what is your advice for newcomers coming into, a maintenance, I guess it's a team, or, going to find a maintenance job, it's a trying to, build their career. What advice would you give them?
It's tough. It's tough because there is so much to learn. But don't take your ball and go home. It's gonna be it's a lot of days where you're gonna think, man, I wish I would have done something else. I wish I would have gone into a different business. But stick with it. This is such a rewarding field to be in, and it's changing every day. And for those who are trying to grow themselves, whether that's in leadership or in the technical world, don't ever think that you have to be the subject matter expert on everything, because you won't be. And that imposter syndrome is really going to wear you out. Just understand that you can be the go-to person on a few things, and you can have connections and networks that help you with everything else.
Yep. Yep. I say networking is, I would say, is the number one key to learning as much as possible. I mean, it's kind of the way that, I've always implemented. I mean, you might be able to have like all the, knowledge in the world for this one specific thing, but I say, hey, if you have a network of guys that you've worked with in the past, or you've utilized, in the past, you can obviously take that and, give them a call and say, hey, what'd you do in this scenario? Or how do I solve this problem? Right. I mean, I typically do that all the time. When I was leading the plant floor, if I did not know, I was calling somebody else to find out the answer. And it's super helpful. I did it multiple times. And at the end of the day, you're not the expert, but somebody else that is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's what's really going to help you out the most. You don't have to have all the answers, but if you have that person's phone number, that's almost as good as having all the answers.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of phone numbers, say, sorry, my phone went off. Obviously somebody's calling for an expert.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's really good. I definitely think, developing a newcomer to the industry is, say, like, building out your network is one of the big things. Obviously learning, you say, a few things to help, be the subject expert is really good, but just having that network to grow and build is definitely a key. So I got one more thing here on that I wanted to kind of bring up here on scaling up a manufacturing plant. Once it's stable and you kind of have the operations in line, do you expect to keep that with the plant, or keep that up with the plant's expectations? Like, what are you planning to do? Like, obviously you have these processes in place that you're putting, but you and I both know, manufacturers always, we want more, we want more, we want more, which is the way that they make money, right? The more parts they produce, more product they produce, the more money they make. It's the way that the world is. But how do you plan to do that in scaling up and continuing to build more and more and more?
I think you always have to be evaluating your processes. And that comes down to having a good relationship with the people on the floor who are actually doing the work. Having that feedback loop, a maintenance technician, they go and they do a PM and they find out that, hey, this says it has 7 lubrication points, but there's actually 8. Have a feedback loop for them to say, hey, I found this, here's a picture of it, and implement that, have that continuous improvement, and get everybody involved. And try to stay ahead of the demand. There's always something in your plant that's not on fire right yet, but it's going to be a big problem here in a few months. But if you can kind of stay ahead of the demand from your operations team, try to keep them, moving steadily, you'll make a lot of headway.
Yeah. No, I agree. That makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people would hey, be appreciative of that. They say, hey, while we're going, they say, like, let's just keep track of stuff. And I mean, if a picture goes a long way, and if the maintenance guy can say, hey, there's 7, but no, really there's 8, the operators always know when they're on the line. So no, that's good. Well, Trent, I appreciate you coming on the podcast with me here. This is Tech Talk with R&E. How can people connect with you, in the future, if they have any questions or if they want to reach out to learn more?
Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I try to stay pretty active on there. I'd love to meet some more like-minded folks, or anybody that has some questions, or just to build my network and have some more experts that I can lean on in the future.
Yeah, no, good. That's the way to go. I say, and I'm same here. Say everybody, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. And I appreciate you listening. This is Tech Talk with R&E Automated. I'm your host, Jordan Dieterle. Today's guest was Trent McJunkin, and I'll be signing off. Thank you.